heck?
What? It's time for more Styropyro. Specifically the worst gadget ever. Testing dangerous medical lasers from eBay. Oh boy. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tyler Folse. I'm a nuclear engineer with a little over 10 years of experience in the commercial nuclear power industry. From engineering to operations to emergency response. I don't claim to know everything there is nuclear, but I can certainly share some knowledge. Let's see what this is all about.
Hey everybody! Recently I was browsing around to the weird side of eBay when I came across some interesting laser gadgets in the health and beauty section. Now you'd probably think this stuff here would be pretty benign, well at least compared to what I'm used to buying on eBay, but I mean some of this stuff is really concerning. I mean these things are advertised to do procedures that typically require huge lasers, so that means that either these things are fake or they're extremely dangerous.
Medical. Okay, so is he talking LASIK stuff or homemade LASIK treatment?
Now naturally I had to find out for myself what kind of lasers we're dealing with here, so I bought a few to test out for this video. Oh yeah, before I go on, I should warn you that all the crazy stuff you're about to see was done completely for educational purposes. I mean, if DIYing medical treatment wasn't sketchy enough, then doing it with some mystery device that was made without any regards to safety regulations is a big no-no.
Wow. I'm curious what sort of instructions these things come with, or recommended procedures. Of course, all of that stuff would be highly questionable.
Yeah, please don't try this at home. Alright, let's start with this one.
Neatcell.
This is the Neatcell Spot Removal Laser, which is apparently an amazing all-in-one cosmetic device. This thing can apparently remove moles, tattoos, freckles, warts, and pretty much any blemish you can think of. And
Removes blemishes. Can it also remove more than blemishes?
only $40. Wow, what a deal! Now is this thing actually legit, or is it just the LED equivalent of essential oils? Well, one way to find out.
Or is it one of those negative ion devices? That's the topic for another video.
This is all what came with the kit here. You got the main device right here,
Picosecond pen.
the power supply, these goggles, and then these instructions.
Picosecond, huh? That's 10 to the minus 12 seconds, which is faster than some nuclear reactions. Taken at face value, of course.
As a general rule, I don't trust goggles that come with cheap kits like these, so I'll be using my own to test this thing out.
That is the sketchiest thing. They give you stuff and you're meant to, I don't know, think it's PPE, but laser PPE can be a little tricky. Not only does it have to be strong enough, but it has to be for the right wavelength associated with the laser device that they're sending you. But knowing this is a $40 cheapo item, something tells me those goggles that came with it aren't going to do you any good.
Now there really isn't any assembly here. I mean the thing just turns on when I plug it in. Now I guess this changes the power here, and then this changes I guess the frequency. Well, here goes nothing. Oh no, no.
It's burning?
Okay, this is one of the worst ideas I've ever seen make it into a commercial product. Like where do I even start?
Dude.
This thing is just a powerful blue laser diode jammed in a pen-style casing, which honestly isn't even that much different than many of the lasers I've shown on this channel. But
Giving this to someone without the required PPE or the training to handle one of these sort of lasers is insane. So if this implement was to be used at a nuclear power plant for some reason, you would have to go through the required training on how to operate it, which would include classification such as Class 1 being a barcode scanner that doesn't pose any health risk. Laser pointers are actually Class 2 though, and I'm talking about your regular less than 1 milliwatt laser pointer, not a Styropyro laser pointer, because they can be hazardous if you stare into it. 3R, which is more moderate, that's up to 5 milliwatts, which is towards the high end of laser pointers. 3B, up to 500 milliwatts, or half a watt, and that you're getting into LASIK surgery kind of range for that one, plus other medical processes. At that level, or even a little before that, that's when you need to be concerned about indirect exposure like reflection. And then Class 4, which is 500 milliwatts and above, other medical applications, cutting, welding. You'll see those occasionally at a nuclear power plant, but at that point, you're going to need hot work permits, so an additional layer of administrative controls. Most stuff you see on Styropyro is well above Class 4. You can argue it's Class S for Styropyro. I'm just kidding. That's not actually a real thing. So hazard awareness, controlled access, restricted areas. I mentioned hot work permits for the higher powered lasers. PPE, eye protection specific to the type of laser. hand protection. And any job involving lasers that I've ever seen in the pre-job brief requires a discussion on how you're going to manage reflection, what type of surfaces are going to be in the vicinity, not just whatever you happen to be using a laser weld on, for instance. And yet you can buy one of these and they just let you go to town. All right.
As a cosmetic device, there are so many issues with that. Let's start with the laser's color. Blue light tends to be strongly absorbed by skin, which means you end up dumping most of the laser's power into healthy skin tissue. This is a big problem, as the whole idea is to not destroy your skin as you target an unwanted blemish like a tattoo. It's not like this thing is weak either. It clearly packs a lot of power. It can easily light matches, as well as burn a bunch of other materials. So what can this thing do to the skin? Well, can't hurt to try, right?
Can't hurt to try, and he literally points it to his skin. This is not how I recommend testing the power of lasers.
Ah! Heck.
Dude! What?
Ow! Yeah, that wasn't pleasant at all. I can't imagine how awful it would feel trying to laser...
This is... Alright, that moment was electro boom with lasers. Alright.
Entire tattoo with something like this. Best case scenario, you replace the tattoo with a horrific scar.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario? Well, there's a lot of worst case scenarios here. Believe it or not, the burn hazard is not the biggest risk here. Ow! As usual with powerful lasers, the real risk is instant permanent blindness.
Yes.
In fact, let's test the average output power with my laser power meter by Gentech EO. Okay, so a little under a watt.
Class 4 it is.
Puts it in the highest laser danger category there is, which means just looking at the spot on your skin can burn your eyes out without goggles. Speaking of goggles, let's take a look at the goggles that came with the laser.
Those look like the goggles you put on to go in those tanning booths. Can't say I recommend tanning booths, by the way.
Huh, look at that. They're completely opaque. You can't see anything through them. How are you supposed to operate the laser if you can't see anything?
Wow. By that logic, they'd be good for infrared lasers since you can't see those either, right? Craziness.
That's the thing. These aren't meant for you. They're meant for your patient. This thing is advertised to treat basically everything, including common facial blemishes like acne and freckles. Putting this thing in your face is just
Yeah, it's going to treat a light scar by giving you a severe scar.
Blind. And that's ignoring the fact that this thing would likely give horrible scars on your face as well. Oh yeah.
That facial expression should tell you all.
One more thing. Why is the laser flashing like that? Well, it turns out that pulse lasers are preferred for a lot of dermatology treatments, as it allows a target to be destroyed faster than the heat produced can diffuse out and damage other tissues. However, there's one problem with that. The listing claims that the laser can do picosecond pulses, which would be an incredible feat for a laser of this size.
Really? I mean, I guess it's not unheard of for them to be portable, but not like a little, like laser pointer size. Probably closer to the size of like a printer or something. But a lot of it, when I think of stuff like that, I think of like using pulses to machine something. And yeah, those would typically be class 4 lasers as well.
It turns out, though, that the pulses are a little over 1/10 of a second, which is not only too slow to make much of an effect here, but it also means that the seller's claim is off by a factor of over 100 billion.
Yep, 10 to the minus 12. They exist, but no, I mean, the fact that you can witness the length of the pulse is not like Styropyro showed in a previous video with the tattoo remover, where that one had more snap-sounding pulses.
I'm legitimately impressed on how many bad ideas were jammed into this single device. I mean, this thing's a stain on our species. But seriously though, if you know anybody with one of these or something similar, please tell them to get rid of it immediately. This product is alarmingly popular and has serious potential to cause permanent injury.
Wow.
For the record, there are similar products out there with different names, and some versions use a near IR laser instead of a blue one. These are all likely to be just as awful as the one I tested. To make matters worse, simply looking up info on laser tattoo removal means you'll probably get ads for this terrible device. Or maybe you'll just say in a Facebook message that you regret a tattoo, and next thing you know, the entire internet's trying to sell you one.
That's just crazy how there's stuff out there. Now, I don't know the medical side of things as much, but I just know if it had even, 100th the level of scrutiny that any, say, nuclear device had with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and its oversight structure, no, this stuff would be taken down in a heartbeat.
Alright, on to the next one. This system is advertised to do pretty much the same thing as the last laser.
Okay, that I could, yeah, systems that are a little bit bigger.
This one's 10 times more expensive and obviously a lot bigger. I've already made an entire video on this ridiculous system in the past, but since this is a video on sketchy DIY medical lasers, I'm obligated to break this thing out again.
Sure.
There's a lot more to this kit than the last one. For one, the laser head here is separate from the power supply. Then you have all this other gear here. You got a foot switch here, you got these tips here that change the laser's output color, you got some actual operator goggles as well as the patient goggles, you got this funnel for adding cooling water, and this treatment cream here. So what's so different about this one compared to the pen laser if they're both supposed to treat the same thing? Well, pretty much everything.
Yes, that tapping sound, it's a lot faster. The pulses are way shorter.
Unlike the last one, which was a diode laser, this is an old-school flash lamp pump laser that uses ND-YAG as the lasing medium. In fact, it's quite similar to the first lasers ever built in that regard. Don't let the old tech fool you, though. This is an absolutely terrifying laser. In fact, it's so powerful that it trashed the sensors on the cameras I used to film it, and that's without even taking a direct hit. The peak output power here is millions of watts, which is powerful enough to ignite air at the focal point and blow craters in a block of tungsten.
So the thing about pulse lasers is they have very high power density. He's not exaggerating when you're talking about this having megawatt levels. That's the same order of magnitude that you use to measure the power output of a nuclear power plant. Difference is, though, it's not sustained. The reason why you're getting megawatts is the time is very short, fractions of a second. And power is energy produced per unit time. So if it's a laser that produced 1 joule of energy in a millionth of a second, it's a megawatt. It's a megawatt laser for that brief period of time where it emitted that pulse. So insanely high power density, but a little different than sustained output for something like a nuclear power plant.
Those that watched the original video of mine, you might remember that I blew up the flash lamp while trying to make it stronger. In my defense, I bought the laser used and the lamp was already near end of life. It was easy to score a replacement lamp and get the laser back to working order. Of course, it's hard to find words to describe the eye hazard of a laser like this. By far the biggest flaw with this kit is that the goggles sent with it are totally useless for the laser. The fact that you can still see green light coming through them means there's no protection here. Plus, as my camera shows, you don't need to point it directly in your eye for it to cause irreparable damage. In fact,
I was gonna say, yeah, picture the cameras as the lens of your eye.
Of high OD wraparound goggles that actually protect you from the laser will cost nearly as much as the laser itself. On the flip side, the nerd in me is really impressed that a Q-switched YAG laser system with relatively high pulse energy can be bought for $500. I mean, seriously, you'd be hard-pressed to beat that price if you build a similar system on your own. The laser is clearly good at blowing craters into things, but is it any good at the treatments it's advertised for? Well, it depends. Now, I should be careful how I say this, but I do think a trained operator could use this system to remove some types of tattoos. I mean, the short pulses and wavelength options are similar to what you'd find in some professional systems. Unlike the last laser, this system produces extremely short pulses, on the order of 10 billionths of a second.
Did he seriously make the Earth flat? I love his humor.
The laser to obliterate tattoo pigments while leaving the surrounding skin relatively unharmed. That being said, the reason it's so cheap is because safety regulations were not taken into account while designing this. This thing is nowhere near an ideal system. I mean, the controls are very inaccurate, and sometimes the laser just shoots out random pulses for no reason at all. To top it,
that's terrifying. If that's a thing, that device would not be allowed near any nuclear power station, or really anything. I'm not sure how OSHA would allow this thing to exist.
Even a professional system in the hands of an untrained operator is bound to leave lots of scarring on whoever it gets used on. This system isn't just advertised,
which is why you have to go through not just the safety training, but also the operations training when operating any laser device or really any tool at all, especially one at a nuclear power plant. You're not just being trained to operate the equipment, you're being trained for what's going to be around you and around your equipment while you're operating. Like, say you're doing a weld on a pipe within a nuclear power plant. Let's say it's a non-critical system, but still said non-critical system happens to be within 5 meters or so of a critical system. So you need to be trained on establishing your work zone boundaries. So just little additional details that make trades that are fairly ordinary more complicated in a nuclear power plant. Though you are typically compensated a lot more to go through all of this training and to do jobs with precision like this. All coming back to you get what you pay for, and I would not want to skimp on any medical laser device, whether it be the equipment or the operator.
Tattoos. It also claims to be able to remove eyebrows and skin blemishes. Now, eyebrows? In case it isn't obvious, pointing a 1,000,000-watt laser at your face isn't a great idea. But the thing is, this isn't even a good system for removing hair.
That close.
There are lasers that can do that, but they have much longer pulse lengths, which are more ideal for blowing up hair follicles.
Not to mention having something this inaccurate and that occasionally does a pulse, and you're going to put this thing right next to your eye. Okay.
Aside from the intended purposes for the laser, this thing can pull off some pretty crazy experiments. The power density at the focal point is so high that it'll actually ignite air. Plus, with the frequency doubling tip, the laser is transformed into a scary powerful green laser, and then that can be used to excite organic dyes to the point that they operate as a laser as well. Compared to the last kit, this one is certainly more impressive. I mean, other than the astronomical blinding hazard.
I can't with the way he's testing it. I know it's safe. I know in the context of Styropyro knows what he's doing, but I wouldn't attempt this.
Probably be used by a trained operator to remove some types of tattoos.
He's a trained operator.
It would still be a terrible idea to use it on yourself, though. Alright, what do we have next? Oh yeah, how about this laser plasma thing? This one is supposed to remove a lot of the same blemishes as the other systems, but this one is by far the cheapest of the bunch at a little over $5. It's also the most mysterious one. No instructions came with the thing, just the device and some needle attachments.
This thing is potentially the most terrifying one.
How I'm supposed to use it. Honestly, this doesn't look like a laser at all. I mean, if this is supposed to be the output, then it certainly isn't visible light that it produces. Well, let's turn this thing on. Is it even? Oh, okay. Yeah, so, okay, that must be activated. Then this has to be the output. Huh. Ah! Heck. What is this thing? I mean, it's definitely not a laser. There's no visible output, but it definitely burns or shocks.
Watch it be an infrared laser.
Something. Ow! Yeah, so it can definitely burn, but the tip itself isn't hot. So it's got to be producing high-frequency electricity to burn like that. Okay, check this out. Since it can light up this neon bulb, this thing's got to be producing relatively high voltage. I mean, these things don't light up until you're close to 100 volts or so. Okay, this is really impressive. So this is a Nixie bulb here. And look at that, it lights the whole thing up. I can even do it capacitively straight through the glass. Wow.
Plasma pen.
Yeah, that is really, really cool.
Alright. Yeah.
I've played with it a bit more now, and I've noticed that it seems to produce an arc to objects that have a bit of capacitance to them. It's actually kind of fun engraving anodized metals with it when the power's cranked up. Plus, I can use it to draw silly things on an apple. Alright, so it's a lot of fun for screwing around with, but is it of any use for burning off skin blemishes? Well, the thing is, high voltage, high frequency sources do get used in medicine to burn off skin blemishes. They don't exactly look like this, though. The idea itself is pretty cool, though, because at high enough frequencies, the polarity flips faster than nerve cells can be depolarized. This is why it can burn, but not shock. Interesting.
It almost looks like it's one of those lances for dealing with acne, except this one would cauterize it as well. Huh.
Of course, that speaks nothing about the safety of this thing. Now that being said, I do want to try removing a scar just to see how well it works. This scar right here seems to cause me a lot of problems in my social life. Alright, here goes nothing.
What?
Oh, heck. Why do I do this stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, my... Oh, this...
And one that's kind of in a bad position, so you're going one-handed that you can't even necessarily see is... Wow, alright.
Oh my gosh. Oh, man. It smells so bad. Oh, that was extremely unpleasant. Now I'm too impatient to wait and see what this thing turns into, but judging by how that felt, it's gotta make whatever blemish you have much worse. Now there could also be a risk of deep tissue burns here.
And he's so cheery about it.
I'm curious what's actually inside this thing, so I'm gonna tear it apart. Wow, the FDA and FCC would have a stroke over this. What is this, a Slayer exciter circuit? I mean, the burns from this thing feel a lot like the burns my Slayer Exciter gives me. Ow! I wonder...
What did he do? Oh, okay. Alright.
I'm kidding.
Oh, alright.
Well, I certainly don't recommend this for any sort of medical...
I was about to say, what did he just put in there, but alright.
...medic use. And this thing definitely isn't a laser like the listing said. However, it still may be useful as a portable high-frequency source for lighting up gas tubes.
That's so weird. Yeah.
Alright, what do we have
Frequency
left?
and a pen.
Well, a lot of things, but I'm just going to skip to this monstrosity. This is a huge surgical laser that came out of a hospital. Now, I'll be honest, it's not totally fair to include this one in the video because it was never marketed for DIY use. Now, that being said, it is still a medical laser I did buy on eBay. Now, like a lot of medical goodies, this one ended up on the surplus market when its licensing expired and newer laser tech became available.
Sure.
Now, I knew this thing was 150 grand, but thanks to eBay, I bought this one for 500 bucks. This thing can do over 100 watts average of green light, which makes it by far the brightest laser that I own. The peak output power is many thousands of watts.
Wow. Thousands of watts. Okay, this is serious.
Pump and dump, baby. A 100 watts of green light is so bright that it's hard to capture on camera. So as a comparison, here I have a 1.6 watt green laser that I threw together recently. Now obviously this thing is extremely bright. I mean, it lights up my entire shop. Now let's take a look at what this looks like compared to the surgical laser. Pretty crazy, right? It makes this thing look like nothing. As expected, this thing can tear through a lot of materials as it was designed for blowing up flesh in a surgical setting.
I mean, a 100-watt green surgical laser, I mean, when used properly, sure. Precise cuts, ablations of tissue with limited damage to surrounding tissue, which is what you want in any surgical device. Could even use it to coagulate or vaporize things, depending on what the procedure is. Now, as far as to why it's green, so green is just electromagnetic radiation at around 530 nanometers, and it's strongly absorbed by hemoglobin and melanin. That is to say, this procedure will result in minimal bleeding compared to, say, a different color. And as far as safety is concerned, so yeah, you're going to want your eye protection specific to the green 530 nanometer wavelength, and strict operational controls, not unlike operational controls you have when, say, raising a nuclear power plant's power level. I've never taken part in a laser surgery, so I don't necessarily know what sort of operational like verification practices, tools they use. Like, for instance, if there's a step verifier, independent verifier, what type of oversight you have, if there's like a technician or a surgeon involved, how many people are required to be there, how many people review the surgical procedure ahead of time. But I would assume, after all, this is something that human lives depend on, so I would expect this device to be maintained, well calibrated, the optical devices properly aligned, similar to the way things are in the nuclear industry.
This laser actually has a lot in common with the Big Tattoo laser. They're both lamp-pumped frequency doubled Nd:YAG lasers, but this one uses an arc lamp instead of a flash lamp. This means the output is more or less continuous. I say more or less because this laser is actually pulsed. It just looks continuous because the rep rate is so high. Believe it or not, that thing is only outputting light about 1% of the time, but it's doing so in pulses that exceed 10,000 watts. The lamp actually stays on the entire time here. That makes sense. But these pulses are generated via Q switching by an acousto-optic...
I mean, you can kind of hear it, more so than you can see it, in terms of telling it's pulsed.
Later. This kills the gain of the cavity for a brief period to allow the YAG crystal to build up energy, and then it restores the gain for a moment to allow the energy to be released all at once in a powerful pulse of light. These pulses have two functions. For one, they're preferred over CW in many surgical applications involving ablating tissues, but it also makes the conversion step from IR to green much more efficient, and this is due to the gigantic power densities attained in the frequency doubling crystal. The pulses are being generated many thousands of times per second, and in fact, you can hear the pulses when I stick something in the beam. That hum is actually due to the laser pulses inducing vibrations in the material.
Wow. That is so cool.
This laser was not plug and play like the other ones. In fact, the manufacturer put considerable effort to prevent people like me from being able to use it. Obviously that wasn't able to stop me, but it wasn't exactly a genius on my part. The first issues I encountered were probably due to the fact that this thing sat in storage for several years.
Oh, wow.
A water cooling line exploded and soaked the electronics inside the first time I powered it up. I replaced some bad fittings and then let it dry for a while before firing it up again. Surprisingly, it still started up just fine after this, but even so, the onboard computer prevented the system from making any output without being fed service cards. This meant that I needed to either build my own.
That's one thing a lot of people don't realize about water is a lot of the conduction properties of water come from its impurities. Pure water or near pure water, in the case of deionized water, is not nearly as conductive electrically.
Lamp supply for the laser, or just find a way to hack the onboard computer. The first option would be painstaking and suboptimal, so the second option was by far preferred. I don't exactly get along with digital electronics, but thankfully, I knew just who to ask for help with this. My friend Kevin, who's the owner of Starlight Photonics, has spent considerable time reverse engineering this surgical laser, and has even developed a board that overrides the original controls. I bought one of these boards from him, and sure enough, it worked super well. I just had to solder a few connections, and after that I had full control over the system. I can adjust a bunch of parameters like lamp current and Q switch rate, as well as monitor the water temperature and pressure. His board plus the surgical laser gives an unbelievably low-cost way of attaining a 100-watt green laser system.
That just looks
I don't
so
usually
cool.
recommend eBay sellers, but this is an exception.
I mean, it's more of a fun green glowy thingy than what a lot of people think nuclear power is.
I bought from Starlight Photonics for many years,
There's
and
not
I've gotten
much
a
of
lot
that.
of cool parts for my projects from them. Now, obviously, attaining a 100-watt laser system as a new experimenter is a terrible idea, but for research projects on a budget,
I'd start
it's a
with
pretty
laser
hard deal to
pointers.
beat. Now I could go on for hours and all the weird stuff I've bought on eBay, but at that point it really isn't in line with the original topic here. The main takeaway is that none of these gadgets are safe to use on yourself. Honestly, it's really disturbing on how many of these gadgets get sold in.
I also wonder how many medical gadgets in general, like even like surgeons don't perform surgery on themselves. Even if the device was safe, that's a little different.
High volumes to clueless customers. That's not to say I don't see the appeal here, though. I mean, for somebody who's looking to get rid of a blemish, but they're embarrassed or can't
For
afford
$5,
treatment, they might look into getting one
use
of these
the plasma
products.
pen.
And to be fair, there's not much info out there if you're trying to find safety concerns. And to make matters worse, there's probably a lot of fake reviews out there as well.
There's probably fake, like, safety procedures and stuff, too, which is horrifying.
These gadgets are safe, but the real loser in this bunch is the Neatcell. This thing is an absolute disgrace. If there's any gadget that should be wiped from sites like Amazon or eBay, it's this one. Shame on whoever put this thing on the market. Well, I guess that's about all I have for you today.
It's crazy how so much of this stuff out there exists. I don't know. Thanks so much for the recommendation. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.